Good morning, everyone. This is Lisa Wheeler with Carmel Communications. I know a lot of you. So first of all, just thank you to all the wonderful press that has joined our event this morning. We're excited to be able to offer this exclusive opportunity for a Q&A with Ethan Hawke and Eric Groth of the film Wildcat, which is going to be starting out in theaters this coming Friday. So we're super excited to offer this time with you together this morning. I wanted to just lay a few ground rules, logistics, for those of you that have never been on one of our Crowdcast events. There's two areas within the feature, the program feature, for you to communicate. There's the chat feature where some of you have already been talking, and then also there is a little question mark to the right of your screen, which is the Q&A section. That is where we're going to be hosting the questions from the media for the event. So if you can post your questions in the chat area, and then we will be moving them over to the Q&A for David in moderating this wonderful event. We'll be able to select questions from those of you that want to ask questions. We're running this a lot like a press conference in essence, although in the virtual way. So if you can put the name of your outlet, your name and the name of your outlet before your question, so we will know who we are announcing for the question for everyone to be able to hear that's participating. A reminder that we would like you to keep your questions to the topic at hand, which is this great film. And that subject matter. Eric Groth, who many of you know, faithful, committed Catholic, was the executive producer of Paul the Apostle of Christ. He is here as well to answer questions that you may have. So we encourage that line of questioning as well. And if you have any trouble with any audio or anything during the course of the event, also post that in the chat, and our tech producer that's on the back end will help to facilitate that as well. I also want to call your attention to the green call to action button in the middle of the screen, and that'll take you to the Oscilloscope website, where all of the locations for the screenings as they are now, where the film will be coming out beginning on May 3rd, are posted. So if you're, as you build your stories, wanting to know where the film will be seen across the country, that will be the link to go to. And then, of course, please communicate with Kevin as a follow-up to this if you need any additional press materials or anything like that as you prepare your stories for the film Wildcat. The next is I want to just introduce our moderator today, who's going to facilitate this event. Many of you know him, David DeSerto, who used to be the director of the Sheen Center and is now full-time film critic and media consultant, longtime friend, and I'm just so glad that he can be part of this event. I know that he's going to be starting things off here with some thoughtful questions and really just helping to take us through this next hour together. So thank you all for being here. We look forward to the stories that you'll be producing on this film, and just enjoy this next hour together. Thank you very much for being here. And thanks to Rob from the Catholic Media Association for helping us to promote this event as well. We're very grateful.
Thank you, Lisa. And welcome to members of the Catholic Media. Another favorite Catholic author of mine, G.K. Chesterton, once said that the highest form of human thought is gratitude. So I just wanted to start off by expressing my gratitude to our two guest panelists today, Ethan Hawke and Eric Groth, for taking the time out of their busy schedules to talk with us this morning about their wonderful new film, Wildcat. Ethan is a 4-time Academy Award nominee and the director, co-writer, and producer of Wildcat, who over the past 30 years has established himself as a multifaceted artist, actor, screenwriter, director, producer, musician, and best-selling novelist. Eric, the film's executive producer, has spent the last 20 years in film production, including founding ODB Films back in 2005. His producing credits include the Gabriel Award-winning Full of Grace in 2016 and partnering with Sony, Paul, Apostle of Christ in 2018. Their current project, Wildcat, as you know, is a film about Flannery O'Connor, portrayed brilliantly by Ethan's daughter, Maya Hawke, which focuses on a pivotal year, 1950, in both the literary career and personal life of the Southern novelist. But it's so much more than a biopic. So many of Flannery's stories deal in this film with topics like faith, suffering, art, and human frailty. It blurs the line between reality and imagination as it reveals O'Connor, the woman, the author, and the believer through the prismatic lens of her short stories. Their characters brought vividly to life by Maya Hawke and a cast of talented actors. Again, just to remind you, as Lisa did, that I'll be starting things off with a few questions, but we really want this to be interactive. So we encourage you to submit questions of your own. But before we start the conversation, I've also been asked just to start with a brief prayer. And I thought of no better option than to use Flannery's own words from her beautiful prayer journal. So if we could take a moment and just start by, as all things, in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Dear God, I cannot love thee the way I want to. You are the slim crescent of a moon that I see, and myself is the earth's shadow that keeps me from seeing all the moon. I do not know you, God, because I am in the way. Please help me to push myself aside. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now I'm going to push myself aside, and I'm going to let the two guys who you came for do all the talking. So, gentlemen, Ethan, Eric, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Great
Thanks
to be
for
here.
those beautiful words.
Well, let's start with a pretty basic question, and I'll direct it to you, Ethan. Why Flannery O'Connor, and why were you determined to make this film? And has your 30 years somehow, as an artist, somehow led you to this project in any way?
Well, I feel like it has. I mean, I've never in my life had a project that happened that was cooked so slowly. I mean, strangely, it begins with my mother, who was selling college textbooks in Atlanta, Georgia, when I was 11 years old, and she was falling in love with Flannery O'Connor. So the house that I grew up in, Flannery, you know, when you're a kid, you don't know any other reality than your parents. And in our house, Flannery O'Connor was the most important Southern writer in American literature, because that's what my mother thought. And then you know, cut forward, I don't know, 20 years, and my 17-year-old daughter is falling in love with Flannery O'Connor, and she discovered the prayer journal on her own and started coming to me with a lot of questions about Flannery's writing and what it meant about creation. The main thesis that Maya took away from the prayer journal was this struggle of, can creation be an act of worship? If you're really ambitious, what are you ambitious for? Are you ambitious to make yourself fabulous, or are you ambitious in service of the art form, in service of communication? Kind of the larger questions that Flannery was asking herself were the same questions that Maya was asking herself as she was dreaming about a life in the arts. I was so grateful as a father to have that conversational door opened. And Miss O'Connor's work it just invited us into, you know, you could take a story like Parker's Back and talk for hours about what does that mean? Why is it so upsetting? But I was so grateful to those stories and the writing, because it just provoked real family discussion in a way that I wasn't able to do on my own. And when Stranger Things started blowing up, Maya got excited about having more agency in her own work and what kind of work she was making and putting into the world. And she came to my wife and I, who would, you know, we have our own little production company. And she said, would you guys make a movie about Flannery O'Connor? And to us, it seemed like a dream come to me, just that your daughter would reach out to you about a subject matter that you care about. she knew how important it was to me. And so as I started working on it, it felt like years of thought had the opportunity to be manifest in this film. So that's the short answer that was kind of long.
Well, I certainly want to circle back at a later point about that theme of that tension that Flannery felt between ambition and vocation. But before we do that, Eric, a quick question for you. In Flannery's posthumously published collection of essays, Mystery and Manners, she examines the role of the Catholic novelist and that relationship between faith and creativity. And using her signature brevity and barbed wit, she has this line that a Catholic novelist does not need to be a saint, does not even need to be Catholic, but unfortunately needs to be a novelist. You know, you are Catholic. I can't speak to your sainthood, at least yet, but you have to be a producer. So, can you talk a little bit about your role as producer in this project and how your Catholic faith influenced that role in whatever capacity?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, as a producer, we've got to be passionate about the content, right? And so I feel like this is really a full circle. You know, we started Outside the Box in 2005 as a simple little not-for-profit company to create short films for Catholic teens because, we wanted to, I wanted to stir the pot. There wasn't a lot out there, a lot of great resources that were presenting the beautiful, the good, and the true. And for me, in terms of the content wise, Flannery said that she's always trying to get down under things where you are. And I always had a desire, like in creating films and really sharing with teens a very good, true message and helping them look in different places and seeing God in different ways in their life. And, I think she said at one point, like, she detested kind of the sugary slice of inspirational pie that spiritual writers at the time served up. And I really wanted to be able to get young people in that time a fresh and new look at what does faith mean. And so as a producer, there's a purpose behind it, right? The kind of content, the desire to produce certain kinds of content, to bring it out into certain audiences. And, for me, it becomes just a matter of a lot of logistics. You believe in a project, right? And we had a very generous chairman come behind, and we were able to find the financing and support. And Ethan came alongside and said, "Hey, let's do this together." And we were passionate to do it together. And so it was just, diving in and working out the logistics. But first and foremost, really loving the content, really appreciating the people we're going to work with. We were very attracted to the fact that this was a project that Ethan wrote and worked with his daughter on. That was very attractive to me, especially as a man who really honors and loves family. But yeah, no, just diving in and working out the logistics, and it's rooted in what are we passionate about and what do we want to do. And I think full circle, like the reasons why I started producing films in the beginning is very evident in the person of Flannery O'Connor and the kinds of ways she told stories and the kinds of ways she unfolded grace and broke it open and bringing that message out. Really important.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely talk about grace because that's so evident in the film. She also said that when people said she couldn't, because I'm a Catholic, I can't be an artist. She said, because I'm a Catholic, I cannot afford to be anything less than an artist.
That's right.
So Ethan, one interesting thing about the narrative structure of the film, and there's many things that are interesting that we could talk about, was rather than trying to cram her whole life into a film, you zeroed in and focused in one particular year, I believe 1950. Why that year?
It's a great question, and the answer is so obvious that it was arresting to me. When Maya came to us with this thing, I had the immediate thought, I knew that Flannery had a funny line about somebody asked her, what would you tell your future biographer? And she said, not to write it because there's nothing here. All I ever did was write and feed the chickens. And I thought that that was probably true. There's not a lot of drama there, except the drama is inner imagination. And if there was a drama, it was the diagnosis of lupus. Her father had died of lupus, and she felt that very keenly as a death sentence at a very young age. Now, coincidentally, that's the age Maya was at. Maya was 24 when she was coming to us with this idea. And I thought, wow, this is being dictated to me. Like let's set the movie when Flannery was Maya's age. Let's go right here. Let's zero in on this moment where, because I do think probably what elevated her thinking and writing so much was the fact that mortality was forefront on such a talented young person's mind. You know, you take a brilliant person and then you put reality of mortality. Most young people aren't thinking about that in the way that she was. And I think it elevated the way that she thought. So I thought, we'll make the film around this diagnosis and what's happening to her imagination. There were a couple North Stars for me. One is her line about how important mystery is in art, and that the movie needed to be mysterious, that we needed to try to focus on the invisible in some way, and that if you try to be too linear, it breaks up. It won't be a film that she would admire. And the other one was a discovery. You know, one of her favorite lines was, "The kingdom of God is in the midst of you." And I found that line combined with, in her home in Milledgeville, she had turned her writing desk away from the window and built a kind of shrine where she wrote. And I got very interested in the decision to turn the writing desk away from the window, and in combination with that line, because it seemed to me that that was an indicator of a level of acceptance, that not only she was trapped in this home, she couldn't have the life that she had imagined that she wanted. But once she accepted that, she realized it was okay. She could bring the world to her. And she didn't even, not only did she not need to go to any fancy place, she didn't even need to look out the window. And so those were kind of my North Stars about how to build the script.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's and again, I want to explore that theme of grace a lot more as we work in some of the other questions. But before we throw it to the first clip, maybe just one more question, just about the structure. Another Catholic literary luminary of the 20th century, J.R.R. Tolkien, often wrote about how, because certain stories aren't real, doesn't mean that they're not true. Truer on a deeper, profound level. And so much of what we get out of this film, the truths about Flannery and about what Flannery was trying to express through her literary works, are in her stories. So can you talk a little bit about how you decided, the creative decision to incorporate some of her short stories into the biography, and by doing that, you're actually revealing some deeper, profound truths about her, the person, as well?
That was where the mystery lies for me. As a person who's spent his entire life in the creative arts, I know that, like, as a performer, as an actor, when you get at a moment that has truth for an audience, it's not caught up in, oh, I'm really am this police officer in this specific situation. But you get at something more true about the essence of who you are, and you open that up for the audience. It's a little mysterious, but we all feel it happening, whether it's music and painting. I feel like good art is representative. It doesn't mean that the person doing it is so great. It's representative of that part of all of us that exists. If you read Shakespeare or Tolkien, for example, they make you feel really smart, because they're talking about sophisticated ideas, but they've opened up a channel where we can meet. And I feel that Flannery does that a lot. And I felt that the stories, there was a certain math to it that made sense. I wanted stories that explored the relationship between the mother-daughter. I started seeing aspects of Regina in different characters in the stories. And I saw certain aspects of autobiography in certain characters in the stories. And so those stories came to the forefront in how to make this movie. I wanted to see, for example, Good Country People, in some of her letters, Flannery shares with some of her friends, this is my most autobiographical work. And she's experimenting with a true confession. So we have a scene where, Liam Neeson says, now it's time for a proper confession. And I go into Good Country People because it's not her, but it's an aspect of her that she's sharing, and she can see herself with the same discerning eye that she bends towards other people. And so through many of the stories in the movie, she's seeing the hypocrisy in other human beings. And the final one, she turns and really stares at herself. And that's the kind of math I was using for why I picked that story and not the other. Is how do they help tell our story?
And it's done to brilliant effect. I mean, because so much of what Flannery is grasping at, just goes beyond language. So you have to wrap stories around some of these. I mean, I think it was Chesterton who said a mystery isn't something that you can't know anything about. It's just something you can't know everything about. And the stories help us understand a little bit about those mysteries that she's working in. Well, some questions are coming in, and I do want to throw to the first clip, but maybe we can work in maybe one or two of these questions before we do. First question is from John Berger from Alatea. And the question is, why wasn't the film filmed at Adelasia and Midgeville?
Well, now you get into our business, because Marvel Studios has taken over Atlanta, and there's no crew there. That's first off.
Practicals.
Second of all, it's extremely expensive to rent. Third of all, the people who own the estate and control the rights were based in Kentucky, which had a kickback, which means tax incentives made it incredibly cost effective for us to shoot where we did. And my wife and I and Eric, we all drove around and scouted, and we found the locations that we needed. I lived in Georgia for a while and had been there. And so I was looking for, all right, can I make this work? And we decided that we could, because we couldn't shoot in Andalusia anyway. I mean, it wasn't fiscally, for so many reasons, it wasn't going to happen if we tried to do that.
Yep. Well, as grace builds on nature, sometimes art builds on practicality. So
that's exactly right.
Absolutely. We have another question from Mike Mastromateo from U.S. Catholic Magazine, and this is posed to either of you. Do you think Flannery O'Connor's life and work are well known enough to draw a large viewing audience for the film?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, Eric, or I could take this. I'll do first part, and then Eric, you take it. The answer is no. I mean, Eric and I have joked with each other, if we wanted to make a hit movie, we should make a movie about zombies and Stephen King. I mean, I don't know. I mean, but you don't set out. There's a secret agenda here, which is that we think her work is interesting and we want to share it to people. And we wish that would be true, that it was large enough to draw a viewing audience. And maybe this film needs to be made to make that happen. I mean, Eric, what do you think?
No, I think so too. When I think about the audiences, we made this for particular audiences, which was just a joy, right? We made it for the literary audience who absolutely loves and adores Flannery. It's been fun to show the film to people who really do have a deep appreciation for Flannery, and to see them come back and have dialogue about that. So for the literary audience, for especially Catholics who read Flannery, I knew some who read Flannery and most who didn't. Those who read Flannery either really loved her. Those who maybe read one or two things were like, I'm never reading her again. There's this whole spectrum in there, and so you kind of target the Catholics. I'm so fascinated, and I love the fact that you've got Maya, who's just a powerhouse and an up-and-coming powerhouse, who is young and has a tremendous young following. And so Maya made it for her audience. We made it for her audience, and it's awesome.
I think I had a very heartwarming experience the other day. We screened the movie, and Lexington, and it was a big movie theater, and there were a lot of people there, and there were so many young women there with a copy of Flannery O'Connor's collected works who'd never read her. They were there because they admired Maya. They were interested in what she was doing. And I don't think just admiring her, I think they are seeing in what they are hoping the movie will be is a story about a woman's relationship to herself, her faith, and her work, which there aren't a lot of movies made about that subject matter. And so in a way, there are a lot of seekers out there. And Flannery was a seeker and a truth seeker. And there's a lot of people from every walk of life who are interested in that. And they can find a friend in her.
There's some data I would love to grab after the first couple months. Flannery's publisher, FS&G, out in New York, watched the film, really loved the film, and have really been getting behind it and doing bookstore events. And the people that I've showed it to who didn't know Flannery much, all the response has been they really want to go and read. So I would love come the end of June, July to see if there is an uptick in the sales of Flannery O'Connor books, which would be awesome for us to be able to point people in that direction and say, hey, read her. She's got a lot to say for today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so now why don't we throw to the first clip now? And again, I just want to remind the attendees that if you want to find out more information about the film, you can click on that green button below and it will direct you to the film's website. So let's throw to the first clip and then we'll come back with more conversation.
So my question is, do Christians, do Catholics, do whoever, pick one, believe that they're actually eating Jesus like cannibals? Just saying. And if so, then how can you stand on a moral high ground?
Well, Walter, the question seems to be to me whether a person believes that we are created in God's image or whether he believes that we create God in our own. Now, I don't know the answer, but I do remember as a child when I would stand in line to receive the host, I always thought of it as the Holy Ghost. He seemed like the most portable person of the Trinity. Now, I think of the Eucharist as a lovely, expressive symbol. The synecdoche of God.
If it's a symbol, then to hell with it. It's a lot harder to believe than not to believe. What people don't understand is how much religion costs. They think that faith is a big electric blanket, when really it's the cross.
I love that scene. And, you know, that line about not just being a symbol is probably one of my favorite all-time Flannery O'Connor lines. And when I heard about the film, I was wondering and hoping that it was going to make it in. So I just want to thank you for getting in that line. The way you married it brilliantly with the line about not the blanket, but the cross. And I think that's from one of the letters that she wrote to someone they just complimented themselves. So just thank you for that. You know, one of the challenges that Flannery faced throughout her whole life, and which you touch on very poignantly throughout the film, is that tension, that inner wrestling between her ambition as a novelist and her sense of devotion to God and serving God. And you know, can you be a good Catholic and a good writer? Can you be a person of faith and still have ambition? And in Mystery and Manner, she really loops in Thomas Aquinas into this conversation about how any act, if done truthfully, and certainly art, can be a good in itself if it's done in truth and honesty and authenticity. Right. Can you talk a little bit about that theme and why that was such an important theme for you to work into the film?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the theme of the film. I mean, you know, we put some of Thomas Aquinas's words in Liam Neeson's mouth, in that the movie kind of builds to this scene with her parish priest, that played by Liam Neeson, and ultimately, I feel in reading all her work and reading her letters, there's a drive towards excellence. And when you bring out excellence in yourself, based on your own judgment, we know when we're doing our best, and we know when we're not, and we know how we can grow. And somehow intuitively, I feel that we know those things. And that scene in the movie is what everything builds towards. And that's what I think starts her on her path towards the final realization that she doesn't need to go anywhere. It's her acceptance of her situation. And I love joy is sorrow overcome. It's one of everything doesn't have to be perfect by the way that we make it. It might be perfect as it is because we're supposed to go through the challenges that we go through. She speaks very beautifully about the power of diminishments. You started this conversation about gratitude. And one of the things that she came to feel about her own personal diminishments is they are a great teacher of gratitude. Until you lose the ability to walk, you don't wake up in the morning and say, thank you, Lord. I thank you for letting me walk today. It's a miracle that I can walk. It's a miracle that I have friends. It's a miracle anyone loves me. It's, starting to see reality. And when you start to see reality, you realize how much you have to be grateful for. And so, I don't know, we started the film, the Thomas of him chasing the devil out of the room with the chair. We got that image in the opening trailer of this is what she's trying to do is get the devil out of the room, get the devil out of the room. And it's a life's work, right? But I think that you can't really talk about her without talking about Thomas Aquinas, because I think he was a major influence on the way that she thought.
I think also one of the things I love about that scene and is just the reflection of grace and what is grace. And we have such a tendency as humans to resist grace, or Flannery's opened up for me like where grace is going to come from. It's not always in a nice box with a nice bow, very comfortably delivered. Perhaps the grace in the Revelation scene for Mary was when she got hit in the head with the book. You see that as a violent act, right? She was at her wit's end, throws the book, bam, go back to hell where you came from, you angry warthog. We would look at that and go, that's a violent, not very friendly act. But could we look at it as a grace? Yeah. And I think I think it just opens that up. Change is painful. We resist it, but if we're going to change, it requires that we embrace it. And as Liam's character says in that film, it cuts like a sword before it heals. Yeah. And Flannery worked hard to get down under things where you are, Lord, and to find to bring the supernatural right into the concrete lived experience. And I think she for a long time she probably thought like having to stay at home was a death sentence. But she found life in that, and she found the grace in that, and she found that my honesty in writing and looking at things in a new and prophetic way is how I'm called to live out my life.
And just doing it well. I mean, just doing something well. Watching the film reminded me, ironically, of a film. Probably as farthest thing from Flannery O'Connor was Chariots of Fire. So to compare Flannery on her crutches to Olympic runners is probably not an easy. But there's this wonderful line where the Scottish runner Eric Little, who was a missionary, says that I know God made me for a purpose, but He also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His pleasure. And when you have those scenes of Flannery typing, she almost, you can sense that she's feeling God's pleasure by just doing what she does well.
It's so beautiful what you just said. Lord, make me your typewriter. She has a line, I put it in the movie, and it's hopefully a key to the audience, for the audience to try to understand what we're doing. She has this line about never feeling more herself than when she's writing. She never, she never can completely lose herself and therefore find her true self than when she's writing. So I'm trying to make a case to be made that these flights into the imagination are not digressions. They're explorations into the true self. And there's Eric's heard me say this before because I love it. There's the Joan of Arc line about, apparently, one of the judges said to her, "Mademoiselle, you seem to be a victim of your imagination." She said, "How else would God talk to me?" And if we can really listen to our imagination, and that we can explore so many avenues and heal ourselves and heal our surroundings. You can play, there's so much activity that's happening in our inner life. It's very hard to put on film. Funnily enough, one of the challenges as a filmmaker who's trying to make a spiritual movie is that, the inner life is ripe for literature. You can dive into inner thoughts, but how to express that in cinematic terms is extremely challenging. And I felt like I needed to kind of break convention to try to open up the audience's mind and invite them in on the journey with us. And funnily enough, Eric and I, from the time we started this, knew the movie needed to be extremely disciplined. It couldn't be long-winded. She wasn't long-winded. It needed to be shot simply and adventuresomely. It had a lot of riddles to it, because for us to try to match the level of excellence that she's talking about, that's what we had. I'm not saying we did it, but it's a worthy effort to try to be discerning. She used a scalpel when she wrote. She just didn't let it all hang out. She was a disciplined writer and rewrote constantly. She was rewriting her first short stories on her deathbed.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think it was Orson Welles said that the most impossible thing to do on film is to convey prayer. And you do it very well.
I didn't know he said that, but I've had that thought often. Often you see an actor close their eyes and tears come down, but your next thought as an audience member is, what are you thinking? I want to know. And that's why I thought the power of the voiceover was the tool we had to use. We had to invite the audience into her psyche. This is a woman whose primary relationship in her life was with her maker, and so we had the prayer journal had to be used as a VO.
Entryway into her mind.
Yeah. It works very well. Going to bring in some more questions from some of the attendees. We have Amy Wellborn from Catholic World Report and FYI Podcast. What were some of the stories that didn't make it into the film, Flannery O'Connor stories that didn't make it into the film? And were there any of yours or Maya's favorites that didn't make the cut?
So many. The choice for the cut really had to do with how they could be juxtaposed with the story we were telling, which eliminated a lot of great ones. And one I would have really liked to have done is I can't remember the name right now, of the woman who gets gored by the bull. But I didn't know how we would ever do that. Eric and I would have had to come up with another twice our budget to do that stuff. But really, we were using the ones that explored the thing, what we wanted the audience to be thinking about at that moment. And so a lot of them fell away because of that, not because they aren't great short stories. We weren't curating our personal favorites. We were curating things that would move our strange story in the mysterious direction it's moving.
Well, the ones you picked were pretty darn good. So, but you have such a wonderful selection to choose from. There are no, bad choices in that regard. We have another question from Patrick Higgins from the Missionaries of the Precious Blood. He goes, I loved the line in the film, "The truth doesn't change based on your ability to stomach it." And the question is, how difficult is it to get a mainstream Hollywood film like this financed that has these sort of faith components to it?
It's very difficult.
It is.
In mainstream entertainment, it's part of the reason why to make the movie, to be honest. I feel that You're often seeing priests in horror movies. They're performing exorcisms or a part of some diabolical plot to take apart the universe. Or you're seeing movies that are proselytizing, that are designed to support and champion your existing faith, right? And if you go down one of those two, if you make church the bad guy or you sing to the choir, you have a lot of friends. And if you try to make a movie that is religious in spirit but doesn't do either of those things, I mean, I admire Flannery because her discipline in her faith is very powerful and led her to greatness. And at the same time, she never proselytizes. She doesn't feel that she needs to take on the responsibility of the divine's relationship to any of her brothers and sisters. She is right somewhere, you know, it's very challenging to have a positive relationship to my own faith all the time. That's enough work for me, you know? And I was moved by that, but it doesn't make a lot of friends. So it's a very, very challenging movie to get made. It's why Eric, why I'm so grateful to him and his passion I believe in my whole heart that there are so many people that are interested in this conversation. They're just scared of it. I mean, if we sat at Thanksgiving dinner with a big group of family and friends, and I said out loud, I'd really like to talk about God, half the people would go to the bathroom. You know, half the people would get nervous. It's a conversation that scares people, and it's a conversation that's absolutely essential to our collective wellness.
That's right.
And so I found a friend in Eric, and was able to make this movie, but we're coming out in not a mainstream way, and it's a difficult subject matter for a lot of people. They don't know what to make out of it. And so it's part of why we're so grateful for the people that are here on this Zoom. It does, you know, we're
That's right.
grateful to be having this conversation. It's not one that prints money. It's not one that is asking to be made all the time.
That's right. We didn't set out, you know, to make a faith-based film. You know, I mean, we set out to tell a great story in a very accessible way about a very important figure in the 20th century who had a lot to say. And I love, you know, for me, I love when you just kind of fall into that, right? Like we can talk about the beautiful and the good and the true in her life, because that's naturally who she was. We weren't having to, you know, force a square peg in a round hole. We're just telling a very honest story. I remember when we did our Paul film, and you couldn't get a whole lot more biblical than Paul, apostle of Christ. And when they categorized it in history and not Christian, I was so excited, because I didn't want it to be pigeonholed in this tunnel, in this lane, because there is so much in that person's life that the whole world needs to know, that there are so many things, regardless of who you are, if you're a Catholic or a Muslim or a Jew or a non-believer or an atheist, it doesn't matter. There are how can we tell good stories that draw on the things we have in common, the things that are placed in front of us, so that when we do have the dinner conversation at Thanksgiving, people want to stay and have it. My favorite review of that Paul film was from the Village Voice, and the title of it said, "It's a miracle. This atheist critic kind of likes Paul, apostle of Christ." and I was like, that it swelled my heart, because we want to tell stories that draw everybody together. I know we can make films. We've made a lot of films over the years that preach to the choir and that make Christians happy, you know, the church happy. But can we create something that brings us into honest conversation and dialogue with the massive amount and the variety of people around us and in our circles, that leads us to be able to respect one another and love one another and care for one another and draw strength from each other? that was tremendously exciting about the Flannery as a film, because I knew she'll stir the pot. She'll say things in ways that is not comfortable. And we get to do that. We get to be a part of that, all for the hope, down out in front of us, that great conversations will happen.
That's great answers. She bristled a lot at being labeled a Catholic novelist. And when someone asked her what a Catholic novel was, I think one of the best explanations she gave was just, you open your eyes and you write about what you see authentically. And in her mind, that's what it was. Well, we're going to get a second clip in here now. I'm going to try to get in one more quick question from the audience. And you both kind of answered it already, but maybe we could. So Maria Weering from our Sunday Visitor asks, who did you make this film for? And I guess that could be which audience. Did you make it for, yourselves and hoping that other people would respond in the same way? But who did you make this film for?
Well, I love it when I hear a piece of music or see a film, when I can tell the person or people who made it are talking about something really important to them. And so it sounds self-satisfied or something if you say, well, I really made it for me, or I made it for Eric, or I made it for the other people who worked on the film. But there's this belief that if you speak your truth honestly, there are other people. We're not so unique. Our experiences in life are not so, you will find friends. I mean, I think about some of the greatest. I mean, who did Flannery write for? Who wants to read Good Man Is Hard to Find? Nobody. It's upsetting. But I'm glad she did. It's, we put that line in the movie where Regina says to her daughter, well, why don't you write something people want to read?
I love that line.
And it's because that's not what she was put on. I mean, I loved her Chariots of Fire line. We're put on here to be ourselves. To be authentic. Now, that's hard, to find out who you are and to offer it to others in an authentic way is very, very difficult to do. I wanted to make a movie that I wanted to see. I am a very spiritually minded person. It's the most important thing in my life. And I don't see much about it. I find it in Walker Percy, or I can find it if I read Thomas Merton, or I find it if I read Flannery O'Connor. I find it, and I know these books sell. I know they're printed over and over again, and I know other people are secretly reading them. And so I'm making it for those people that share that common seeking, about exploring what is grace. We know it. We know it's here.
That's right.
It's very hard to define, very hard to make present in our daily thought and our daily actions. I admire Flannery O'Connor. I admire the way that her faith took her forward in her life, and it allowed her to handle adversity, allowed her to think deeply about the world that she lived in. She was not perfect. She was not a saint. She was full of hypocrisy, just like all of us. She was keenly aware of that. And I wanted to make a movie for people that find that interesting. I try not to think that way, because if you think about who you're making it for, it's kind of like inviting people over for dinner. If you think about what they all want, you end up making hot dogs. It's the only way everybody's not going to complain. If you make your special pizza the way your grandmother made it and you do it just right, 17 people are going to hate it, and they're going to think, where are the hot dogs? So you can't let your brain think that way too much. We all want to reach a lot of people and to be liked. We all, of course we want that, but I don't think it's the way to prepare a good meal.
Wow. Yeah. I think it was St. Catherine of Siena, another strong Catholic woman, said, be who God created you to be and you will set the world on fire. It's just
That's
being
right. Set it ablaze.
So let's get to our second clip, and I think then we'll have a short period right after that, just maybe for one more question, and we'll wrap things up after that. So here is the second clip from Wildcat.
Dear Regina, I have good news. They tell me I've won the Reinhardt Iowa Fiction Award. It means $750 from a respected New York publisher and gives them an option to publish the novel if I can ever finish it. I hope you and Duchess are well. Don't let the new yardman demoralize the ducks. Love, MF. P.S. Please restrain yourself from sending me any more aprons. I know it will be hard, but please.
All right, Flannery, the room is yours.
This story is called Parker's Pack. Sarah Ruth was plain.
Again, such a wonderful clip, and you pack so much in. You just tell your story so cinematically with just little clues. And again, that goes to that almost that incarnational filmmaking. It's sacramental in the sense that external stuff speak to internal realities, and I think that's wonderful. Well, I'm want to be mindful of the clock. We have a couple of more questions. One of them, Elizabeth Westhoff, freelance writer. Did you develop any particular connection to Regina, given her relationship to Flannery and yours to Maya? I guess making that connection with the mother, was there a parental connection there?
That's a wonderful question. Well, one of the challenges for Flannery in her personal life, and one of the challenges to a contemporary audience, is the fact that she grew up in the Jim Crow South. She was fed on the water and soil of a country that was rife with racism, and she saw all that. She never wrote about what it was like to be oppressed because she didn't know anything about that. But she wrote a lot about white hypocrisy, and she wrote about it very beautifully and with a sharp razor's edge. Some people have exposed in her life that she was not always flawless. And did you guys just lose me on the internet? Am I still there?
You're here.
Oh, okay, good. My computer made it seem like I lost you guys. And I think it's very challenging talking about race in America, obviously, for obvious reasons. It's a deep and powerful wound. My wife and I also produced a film for Showtime called The Good Lord Bird, which is about John Brown. And it's written by a great writer, James McBride. And one of the things that he told us when we were making that movie is make sure when you cast racist characters that you cast people that you love, because don't portray the racist with horns, because human beings don't have horns. And if you put them with horns in your head, you're kind of saying that racism isn't real. And racism is real. And in this way, this is relevant to Regina, which is, we see a lot of the white South's racist dynamics at play in Regina. And you also see a woman who is taking care of her daughter and keeping her daughter alive and educating her daughter and loving her daughter and supporting her daughter. And that's very complicated. It was very complicated for Flannery O'Connor to live in a house. One of her first unpublished short stories is about how her mother wouldn't let her have black friends. It's a very beautiful story that'll probably get published some point soon, but somebody shared it with me, and it was a real keen insight into Miss O'Connor's brain and the relationship with Regina. I hope that I'm not as complicated a figure in Maya's life as Regina was for Flannery. But you know, I bet if you had Maya in private, she'd probably say some things that were hard that I don't even see. You know, that's the thing about being a parent. You never do wrong the things you're worried about doing wrong. What you do wrong is the things you never thought of. You know, the blind spots that you have. And so certainly we were excited to make a movie about family, as Eric said. We're all family people, and I know that other human beings aren't interested in seeing, you know, our family album. Maya and I knew part of the way that we could pay Eric back and to pay Steve Zahn and Liam Neeson and our cinematographer, who is brilliant, and Shelby Gaines, our co-writer. The only way we could pay them back is with, you know, that pursuit of excellence that Thomas Aquinas talks. We were grateful for this opportunity, but the only way to respond to that was with our best effort. And I think one of the things that's remarkable about the real life Regina is this is a woman who lost her husband and took care of this farm. And I mean, she worked hard. It was a huge responsibility to take care of this grown-up daughter. Her whole life. Those bills were outrageous for Lupus at that time. You know, when you get into the practicalities of their life, she was. There's a lot to like about her, and there's a lot to not like. But usually, the things to not like are things to not like about America, about all of us, and our collective past.
I'll give you a quick bit of inside baseball, and I don't think Maya would mind. I loved watching Ethan and Maya work together. It was a beautiful thing to see. And last day of filming, we're in the church, and Maya was getting ready, and she came down the aisle, and she came up to me, and she gave me a big hug, and she just looked at me, and she said, "Thank you for giving my dad and I this opportunity." And that just swelled my heart, and so I'm just to share that, it was just to watch the two of them in that motion was amazing.
Well, thank you for giving us this opportunity as well. I mean, you know, Flannery wrote a lot about, you talk about family. She said it's in family, or at least in the local community, where the cosmic dramas play out. I mean, that's where.
That's right.
And you actually answered in that. You wrapped in a couple of questions into that one response. So thank you for doing that. And, you know, one of her famous lines was that it's not a novelist's responsibility to tidy up a messy world, and or to tidy up a messy life in your film. You present her life in all its complexity, in all its messiness. And I think you do that honestly and skillfully. So I would love to talk longer, but our allotted 60 minutes have come to a all too brief conclusion. As Miss Turpin says in Revelation, the worst thing in the world is an ungrateful person. So I do not want to feel guilty about that. I want to end where I began, with gratitude for the both of you and for everyone who's joining us on this.
These have been absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic.
They're really informed and wonderful questions.
No, they're great.
Appreciate everybody's thought in all this and their time.
And David, you have a great disposition, and people need a great disposition.
A good disposition. That's all a person needs.
Well, maybe we'll come back someday and we'll talk, because I honestly think if she had lived long enough, she probably would have written a story about zombies. It would have been a commentary on our culture. So maybe someday there's another film we could talk about there. But again, Wildcat is in theaters on May 3rd. Is that correct? May 3rd?
Yes.
And for information, please click on the link below for more information. Gentlemen, thank you. God bless, and have a wonderful day.